It's an unusual sound, I think you'll agree. And also it makes an interesting toy train. Look, it runs along.
Always useful.
Yes. And here's another new invention.
It's got a name.
It's the colander phone.
I think you're just making this up.
The very idea. Anyway, it has two basic sounds. One, struck with a stick. This one's got a really long sustain. The fact they're both colanders is possibly incidental, but I thought they looked good together as well. And we can use a bow here. I was really inspired by a story I heard about the Deep South and the way people would often make their houses into instruments. These really, if somebody lived in a wooden shack, they'd often have a long piece of wire stretching from the upstairs to the porch, and tighten up this wire between two nails or something like that. And
I like the idea of playing the house. That's brilliant. Yeah.
Well, a taut piece of cable could often be made to produce an interesting sound, and the house itself would be the resonant sound chamber.
Have you heard that album, the Fences of Australia?
The Fences?
And it's they're all the fence wires that go around the sheep fields, and they're playing them. They play the different fences.
Oh, I sometimes do that on my walks in Dorset.
You should record it and put it out as an album. That's what they've done in Australia.
Fair enough. On one of my recent expeditions to some of the wilder corners of the United States of America, I came across a yard sale in deepest Georgia, in the deep south, and this good old boy in an old motor workshop, he was desperately trying to sell some things in his yard, so I bought a couple of these cigar boxes, and I'd already seen earlier the same trip some cigar box guitars. So I thought, well, I'm not going to make a cigar box guitar, but I've got a small collection of African thumb pianos. They're sometimes called Mbira, and sometimes they're called Likembe, I think, as well. And they often have metal pins tuned to different notes. And I've used this particular one many times on recordings, but it's starting to fall apart. I used it on my version of Evil Island Home, a song by Kevin Coyne, but it's starting to fall to bits now. It's a beautiful thing though, isn't it? Nice bit of timber.
Yeah.
All these pins hammered out by hand. So I thought I'd make a new thumb piano, but I thought I'd use hacksaw blades, and it's got a very interesting quality. It sort of goes like this. Like that. and if you put a pickup on it, stick it through an amplifier, bit of reverb, awesome sound. There are some orchestras I've heard on Radio 3 in Africa, and they have a big bunch of people, and they're all playing these things really loud through big amplifiers. That's an awesome sound, so to speak. So this is my Bladotron.
What's next?
Oh yes, here's a curious hybrid instrument. This uses blades again, like on the Bladotron, but I've also got some strings on it, so it can go like this. Again, it can be amplified for a more volume. Work in progress.
Is that your name?
Project X.
You look like a man who was making up a name there.
No, I don't know yet. It's still, I might take something off. It's not quite there yet.
So tell me about Moondog. Is he an influence?
Oh yes, I first started listening to Moondog 10-15 years ago, and it's very difficult to find any of the records back then, but gradually I found a couple of CDs, the first one probably being the Viking of 12th.
Lower third, maybe.
Oh, I can't remember.
The Viking album,
yes. Yeah. And I wish I'd had the pleasure and the privilege of seeing him play on the street when he was still living over in New York, because he retired over to Germany sometime later and he didn't play on the street anymore. But he, despite being a blind man, he managed to design and construct several of his own instruments. Amazing. And one which is like a harp, a triangular harp, I think, called the Oud. Sadly, there's not much film of him playing, but there's more albums available now, and I've got as many of them as I could find.
Have you got that one he did with Julie Andrews?
Yeah, I got sent that by Joe Foster. Moondog apparently stayed with Steve Reich and Philip Glass in the 60s, I think, when they were struggling, unknown composers. They had a furniture moving business, and they came across him on the street and they invited him to stay for a few days.
What, there was a Glass and Reich furniture removal business? I can imagine that painted on the side. We've got to see that.
Yes. Yeah, maybe there's a photo of that somewhere. Here's another instrument I have. I didn't make this myself, but I picked it up in Brooklyn at a music shop. It's called a pocket piano, but it doesn't sound anything like a piano. But I use it a lot on my material. It's just made out of very basic materials, aluminium, bit of wood on the back, and And it looks nice as well.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like Hawkwind in a box.
Yeah, different colour, different sound. Yeah, I use that a lot. Apparently, a man comes round to the shop on a bicycle and delivers them. Isn't that nice?